Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Spars. I am a high school teacher in Santa Rosa, a proud member of the Do Tell Story Swap. And welcome to TELLABRATION, a night of storytelling celebrated worldwide on or about the third Saturday in November. Of course, this is not Saturday. Guilds and storytelling enthusiasts all around the globe will share their storytelling talents in concerts held in cities and towns to celebrate the art of storytelling. Locally, TELLABRATION brings together each area's most celebrated storytellers to delight, captivate, and mesmerize audiences with their stories. It creates a network of storytelling enthusiasts bonded together in spirit. This year, many of the events will be online, expanding the possibilities for both performers and audiences. Now, every year at the beginning of TELLABRATION, there is a statement by the founder of TELLABRATION, J.G. Pa Pinkerton. In 1988, I dreamed of having a night each year when storytellers in each community got together and told stories to their family and friends. I called the idea TELLABRATION. Friends of storytelling liked the idea and began making it happen. Each year, the circle of friends has grown, and now TELLABRATION happens all across America as well as beyond. I am only the man who had the idea, and that's not me, that's J.J. Pa Pinkerton talking. Hundreds of tellers telling to thousands of people. May what the tellers share bring joy to many people, and may the listeners come to know that through storytelling, we can draw closer to one another together in peace and in friendship and in love. Storytelling reaches around the world and across all generations, reminding us of our common humanity. I know storytelling creates experiences, and shared experiences are the basis of all relationships. My best wishes go with all who join in this common endeavor. This is the Do Tell Story Swap edition of TELLABRATION. Do Tell was founded in 2010 by Kenneth Foster, who is here, and Elaine Stanley. We started in Kenneth's garage for many years and then have moved to various locations, and now here we are, online, virtual. TELLABRATION has ranged in large venues from the Glazer Center with audiences of 300 to the Sebastopol Library to this virtual audience. Due to Elaine Stanley's influence, we have had top-notch national performers come and headline at our events. Diane Ferlat has been one, Muriel Johnson, another. And this year, we are so proud to have Ethnotech. So a bit about Ethnotech. Ethnotech for the past 41 years has entertained countless audiences, young and old, in libraries, festivals, schools, theaters throughout the world. Both Nancy Wang and Robert Kikuchi and Gojo are veteran creative forces in the Asian American cultural arts and storytelling movement in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond. Ethnotech has performed at the Smithsonian Discovery Theater, the Smithsonian Museum of American History, the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. To their credit, they are the creators of the New Wa Storytelling Exchange Project, an international storytelling delegation program in China, India, Korea, and Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome to the TELLABRATION Do Tell stage, Ethnotech.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you so much. And we are so glad to be here instead of on the news channel watching who's winning and losing, right? But we are dedicating our stories tonight, not only in the art of storytelling, but also to the elections.
And to the people's movements everywhere. So much is going around in the world that we sometimes can think of all we have is the American world of politics, but people are rising up in many places to speak out for justice. In Iran, there's an important event going on with women's movement there, people speaking out. Syria as well, with living conditions everywhere in the world where people can connect and make a difference. It's great to see that people power is available through this technology.
Yes. And so our first story is from Tibet. And it has a really important message in it, but even more so because of what today is. And so,
A story called
Monkey Moon.
Ngamo, 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 ngamo. One night in the land of Tibet, one night a full moon shone upon a beautiful forest with a beautiful pond.
Oh, the pond was so clear, so crystal smooth that the water's surface was like a big bright mirror.
Beside the shining pool stood a towering tree, and that was the home of a band of monkeys.
Chitty-chattery, chee-chee. From high in the tree to the pond below, the monkeys looked and saw something aglow.
Look down there, a golden moon.
I want it.
The monkeys crooned. The moon, they screeched with glee.
When suddenly a voice said,
That's not for you. It's meant for me.
Who? It was their king, their mighty chief, who ruled over these monkeys and everything.
The golden moon is mine alone, and I command this from my mighty throne. I want it now, not later, not soon. Go get it now. Go fetch that moon.
So, the monkeys lined up in numerical fashion. They hailed their chief,
With patriotic passion. We'll fetch the moon for you, dear chief. If that's what you want, we'll be your thieves. So one at a time, down a long, thin branch, each single monkey took a chance.
Each monkey stretched to fetch that disc, but each monkey failed, though each monkey put its own life at risk.
For the tree was too tall and the pond far below. An impossible task for any monkey, you know. But the chief was angry. He jumped up and railed. That's not how you do it. Grab hand to tail.
Oh, hand to tail, chee-chee-chee. They hailed their chief. Hand to tail it shall be.
So the first one climbed out on the limb, second one followed after him, third and the fourth were right behind, so on and so forth down the line.
Hand to tail, chee-chee-chee. Hand to tail it shall be. And when not a single monkey remained, the monkeys exclaimed, Look, we've made a monkey, a chain.
Now the monkey at the bottom of that monkey chain, with all her might, she stretched, she strained, reaching for the moon in the shining pool. Of course she couldn't get it. The king cried, You fool! All of you are fools. You have failed all night. I guess I have to do it myself to get it done right.
So down the chain he climbed as each monkey chattered and chimed. Hand to tail, chee-chee-chee. The chief is coming. Hand to tail it shall be.
Sigh. Oh, the moon in the pond was so golden bright. The king's eyes glowed with greedy delight. With the moon in my hands, I'll be the emperor of the night.
So that big chief of a chap did reach. He stretched and strained a magnificent feat. All the monkeys cheered their big chief on as he bobbed up and down towards that moon in the pond.
When from the top of the tree they heard the tiniest of sounds. Snap! The monkey looked up. Oh! The branch went crack.
Down, monkeys tumbling into the pool. These loyal little monkeys and their
Majesty the fool. Splash went the king and his royal chain of command as 1,000 little moons rippled through their dripping hands.
No, the chief uttered not a sound as his loyal monkeys howled, and a mocking golden moon slipped behind a silver cloud.
Now it's more than a right to reach for the moon or to climb out on a limb.
But to follow a foolish leader is to follow to a foolish end. Chee-chee-chee, chee-chee, the end. Ooh.
Right, thank you, Monkey Moon.
So,
We choose wisely.
oh,
our
we hope
leaders.
the wise were elected. So
Yes.
we will see, won't we?
Yes.
But we cannot lose hope, even if, like, there are gonna be some losses,
Yes.
but we cannot give up. No.
Because for things to evolve, we have to be persistent in change and always create that change from a place of compassion, caring for others, looking out for the many different types of people and generations
and
of
putting
people.
ourselves on the line to make a difference.
Yes, all for the goal of happiness, which we all need. We all live for happiness.
And so from Tibet again,
a story called The Bird of Happiness. Ngamo, 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 ngamo. One day, the people asked, "Happiness? What is that? Happiness? Is there ever such a thing?" Sad to say, there was a time and a place where the people had forgotten happiness. Oh, they were a miserable people in a barren land where barely a blade of grass would grow, hardly any water would flow, and the people shivered in their huts as the cold wind would blow. So you can imagine, in such terrible poverty, that happiness was easily lost. But there were some, perhaps like you, that still believed in happiness, and they believed that as happiness lived, it was alive as a bird of happiness, a bird of happiness.
Is there really a bird of happiness?
And that was Wanja. The young girl was always asking questions of the heart. And the wise man consulted her and said, "Yes, there is a bird of happiness.
Well,
Lives far away, Snow-Capped Mountain Peak."
well, can you see it, chase it, catch it?
No, you cannot catch happiness. No. Happiness will only come to you in a quiet moment, only if your heart is pure.
Oh, well, that's easy.
Oh, not easy. Be warned. The bird of happiness is guarded by monsters. 3 long bearded creatures whose icy breath, that could snuff out a man's life. Oh, many men have tried. Many men have died. Their hearts were not pure.
But if I could only see the bird of happiness, well, then I could tell the people what the bird looked like, and maybe they would believe in happiness again. I'm going to find the bird. Farewell.
And so, with the blessing of the wise man, Wanja began her journey. High into mountain country she walked for many days, up the side of a mountain. And one morning when she awoke, the mist began to lift. There, revealed before, was a snow-capped mountain peak. Suddenly, a whirl of snow and dust whipped all around her, and when her eyes opened, there before her was a shaggy monster with a long black beard.
Oh, long black beard. I'm looking for the bird of happiness. Will you help me?
Yes, Wanja, I will help you find the bird of happiness, but first, a little favor for me. Go back to your village. You have a friend, Lusong. Visit your friend's house and kill his mother.
No, as I love my own mother, why would I kill another's? No, take me, do with it whatever you wish.
So be it. And through his long black beard, the wind shot out and magically changed a smooth path into a vast plain of jagged rocks, sharp like knives, 900 miles long, 900 miles wide. Still, Wanja traveled on and on and on till her shoes were cut to shreds, till her clothes were tattered ribbons, her ankles cut by the sharp rocks, bleeding in the icy wind. She finally crossed 900 miles and stopped to rest on a patch of earth when a shadow loomed up from behind her with a long brown beard.
Oh, long brown beard. I'm looking for the bird of happiness. Will you help me?
Yes, Wanja. You look so tired and hungry. I will help you find the bird, but first a little favor for me. Go back to your village. You have a neighbor, Old Man Silang. He has plenty of food. Steal some for me and poison the rest.
No, as I love my own grandfather, why would I kill another's? No, no, do with me as you wish.
Then know what real hunger is. Into his long brown beard the wind shot out, snatched her food pouch, and hurled her only food she had, tumbling down, 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 into a bottomless canyon. And now she had nothing to eat. Still, she traveled on and on till her hunger like knives stabbed from within. Hunger yanked at her ribs. Dizzy from exhaustion and starvation, Wanja rested in the snow and suddenly felt something in the snow. It was soft and warm and white and tugged on the long white beard of a hideous demon.
Oh, long white beard, I'm looking for the bird of happiness. Will you help me?
Yes, I will help you find the bird, but first, a little favor for me. Go back to your village. Lady Bayama has such beautiful eyes. Gouge out her eyes and bring them back to me.
No, no, take mine instead.
So be it. The wind was so piercing cold, Wanja became blind. Stumbling, fumbling, groping about in a world of blackness, she felt her way over the boulders and rocks, up the side of a mountain, the cold wind whirling all around her. Her wounds were crusted with dry blood, weak from starvation and exhaustion, as that wind was draining her life, draining, draining, draining. And Wanja knew she was dying. But rather than let her last thoughts be of the failure to find the bird of happiness, Wanja chose to think of the people in her life. And with her last bit of strength, she summoned in her mind's eye the warm smile of her mother, and father. And she could feel her love for them right here. And then she began to see the others. Old Man Silang, Lady Baima, Lusong and his mother, and Wanja felt her love for the people right here.
Oh, this is where happiness lives. I'm ready to die now.
Suddenly, in the distance, she could hear a melody swirling sweetly, circling closer, growing louder, and something landed lightly upon her shoulder. Your heart calls to me. What is it that you wish?
Oh, bird of happiness, I am dying now, but my people, they need you so much. Will you go to them and sing your sweet song?
And the bird of happiness sang its sweetest song for Wanja, and the sweetness of that song seeped down deep into her soul, healing her wounds, lifting the pain as tears of joy welled up in her eyes. And when she opened her eyes, she could see more clearly than ever before, for there before her was the most beautiful bird she had ever seen. The feathers glowing the colors of the rainbow, this bird suddenly began to glow brighter and then grow larger and brighter, and Wanja climbed upon the back of the mighty glowing bird, and up, up, up they soared over the mountains, over the horizon, and soon they could see her village below amidst the barren land. What is it that you wish for your people?
Oh, I wish happiness for the people.
Well, the bird gave out 3 loud cries. The first cry, and the sun burst through the clouds, warming the valley below. And the second cry, flowers and trees bloomed in all directions. And the third cry, and crystal cool waters gurgled up between the cracks of dry mud holes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
The bird soared up over the clouds, swooping down upon the breeze to deliver Wanja to her home. Now, The people in her village, they celebrated in grand abundance. They were never hungry. They were never thirsty ever again. And they remembered the wisdom and this love for the people of this Wanja. And they remembered their sufferings and their blessings. But now, most important of all, their own happiness stayed with them here. And their happiness stayed with them here forever and ever and ever and a day, long after the bird had flown away.
So that is our job now.
Hold that joy in our hearts in all the
Yes.
actions that we do.
So we're going to close with just one less than 2-minute piece from China. And it is going to be what we hope is how the rest of our world will be.
And the story from China is called
Heaven and Hell. Phew.
In hell, there is an elegant banquet laid before the people. Tantalizing dishes, dazzling desserts, the finest cuisine. But in hell, the people must eat with 3-foot-long chopsticks. There's struggle and strain, there's torture and pain, as each craving soul tries to feed oneself. The people starve. Such is hell.
Oh, in heaven it is very different. In heaven, there is an elegant banquet laid before the people, tantalizing dishes, dazzling desserts, the finest cuisine. And in heaven, the people must also eat with 3-foot-long chopsticks. But there is no struggle or strain, for in heaven, the people use their 3-foot-long chopsticks to help feed one another. Such is heaven.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, that was really, really beautiful. I needed that. I really did. Thank you so much, Robert and Nancy. So
Yes.
Ethnotech is currently working on bringing to schools the history of early California pioneering, Chinese American fishing villages, as well as producing a novel telling of this legacy. Other projects include being co-founders of the Asian American Storytellers in Action, a network of nationally based professional storytellers combating racism with their art form, and archiving over 200 stories from their repertoire. They run a monthly streaming program, Storytelling with Ethnotech, offering stories and community dialogue on topics of the times, which may include the climate crisis, women empowerment, and every once in a while, and this sounds wonderful, Asian food class flavored with storytelling. That sounds great.
With chopsticks.
With 3-foot-long chopsticks. Yeah. Now, I think the Storytelling with Ethnotech is the program you mentioned before the event, which is on the last Thursday. Is that correct?
Yes.
But not in
And-
November. It
In
will-
November, everyone's eating on the last Thursday
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this month. They're digesting.
You're right. And so it's going to be in December with
Mhm.
Laura Sims. Is that right?
Yeah.
That sounds really wonderful. So
Yeah.
Grace and
Yeah,
gratitude.
everybody.
Yes.
And then in February, Nancy was telling us before the event started that there's going to be an event with 6 Asian American stories of discrimination. And that sounds absolutely fascinating and riveting. So be sure to keep that on your radar for the month of February. Robert, Nancy, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for sharing
Thank you, Brandon.
yourselves, your stories, your wisdom. We really appreciate it.
Yes. We hope that this carries us through the next few days.
And beyond.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and beyond.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
So in August of 2021, I had the pleasure of a private Zoom chat with Robert and Nancy. They were helping me with an article I was writing on cultural storytelling. And it ended up being like a class for me in both storytelling and history. I learned so much. And I'm supposed to be the history teacher. Um, but again, I learned so much from you, and I can't thank you for that very special hour I spent with you.
Well, you wrote a beautiful article. You're so good at it.
No,
So
thank
good.
you, Nancy. I appreciate that. And so, as I mentioned, my voice is like this because I am a teacher. I yell all day long.
Oh dear.
And this is what I'm like every night after a day in the classroom.
Wow.
But I'm not yelling in anger. I'm usually just very enthusiastic. I'm jumping up and down because I have fantastic students. I love teaching them history, but I also, of course, love to slip in a bit of storytelling here and there. And I've been working with one who's very special to me since she took a summer camp, probably about 5 years ago, I think. And her name is Mira Bruce Lowe. She is a senior here at Sonoma Academy, where we are currently in my classroom. She dabbles in many areas of storytelling. Currently, she is the director and the producer of our school play, Chicago. It's a musical, but she's also involved in performing, writing, and directing theater.
Wow.
Mira loves telling stories with her family, her friends, and I saw a few of them are here, May McCarthy, and anyone who will listen, and that includes the rest of us, right? She can't wait to make her debut here at Do Tell TELLABRATION to tell her story. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Do Tell virtual stage, Mira Bruce Lowe, our youth storyteller for the evening.
Yep. Hi. Okay. There we go. Just set it up. If you even moderately know me, you know I am the person you should trust least to direct you anywhere. If it's a 5-minute drive, it will turn into 30 minutes. If it says to go left, I will go right. I couldn't tell you where north is, no matter how many ways people have tried to explain it to me, and don't get me started on the myth that is reading a compass. I know this seems like an exaggeration, so let me set the scene. It's 11 o'clock at night, and I'm driving home to my house in Petaluma from Sebastopol. Everything seems to be going just fine until Google Maps absolutely betrays my trust, and it does not, in fact, put me on the freeway like usual. Yes, I need Google Maps to get home from Sebastopol. Instead, it decides to take me on some back road, probably out of good intentions of avoiding traffic. However, I am thrown off my game. I take some deep breaths and convince myself that if I just follow the directions, I'll be okay. But as I'm putting the pedal to the metal because I'm already running late, fog starts to creep in all around the car. Suddenly, it's almost pitch black and my brights are not cutting it. At this point, I'm taking such deep breaths to the point where I've almost reached enlightenment, when suddenly, in the midst of my intense focus on the rapidly darkening road, my Google Maps starts rerouting and adds an extra 25 minutes onto my time. Turns out I was so focused on the road that I completely missed the single turn I was tasked with and was now speeding towards the beach. Oh, but it gets worse. To put the perfectly juicy bright red cherry on top of this disastrous Sunday, my freaking gas light goes on. Regretting my decision to live on the edge by not filling up my tank earlier in the day, I get worried and I call my parents to tell them I'm going to be home late, but they don't answer. So I call my brother Liev instead, and he tells me, Mira, there is nothing you can do except put on Miley Cyrus and pray. Actually, I do believe I want to talk about the myth that is reading a compass. For me, directional compasses have led me nowhere, and that includes Google Maps. My compasses have always been people. And in this particular moment, I thought of one, my moral compass, my best friend, May McCarthy. May came into my life when I was healing from being heavily bullied in the 4th grade, where every last piece of me was ridiculed. I was broken and I didn't know how to put myself back together. When I left that situation, I entered a new school where everything was unfamiliar. I didn't know anyone, and I began to wonder whether this was the right decision. But then there was May, sitting next to me, drawing the most beautiful rendition of a My Little Pony my eyes had ever seen. She became my first friend, and I began to feel comfortable in front of her. I went over to her house all the time, and one time she was telling me about the rusty dot, and I laughed so hard I peed on her gray dining room chair. We were in the 7th grade, and her mom cleaned it up. And you might think I would never go back again, but I went back the next week and did it again. And as years went by, without even knowing it, May crocheted and painted and drew me back together piece by piece. In high school, May continued to play a part in my moral compass, teaching me to embrace life's messiness, to appreciate the details, and to laugh in the uncomfortable. Now, after 4 years, I have to face the fact that we are probably going to be apart next year at different colleges. So, there I was, running on empty, separated from May by 40 miles, when suddenly my brother's advice made total sense. Only I didn't open up Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball on Spotify. I opened up Contacts on my phone and dialed May. I explained the situation to her and found that rather than crying, now I was laughing so hard I nearly peed again. We both found Lieb's advice to be absurd. How can Wrecking Ball help in this situation? Oh, but that's exactly what we did. May began to sing Wrecking Ball, and soon I joined in. May would scream intermittently for my car to just squeeze a little more juice out of his tank. This lasted for about 25 minutes. Without a compass, without Google Maps, but with May still singing away like a drunken lord, I suddenly see a sliver of light in the distance. For a second there, I thought I had transcended, but it turns out to be my parents watching Ted Lasso. Trust me when I say I've never been more thankful to be home in my entire life. So thankful, to May's delight, I peed on the gray driver's seat. I cleaned it up. Thank you.
Well, I don't need to do any re-spotlighting. I'm here in the room with Mira. And for those of you in the Do Tell Story Swap, you can probably see, given that Mira told a story involving body fluids, I have had an influence on her. I don't know if you are familiar. I usually tell kind of gross, outrageous stories. I have one about a woman vomiting on a bus. I have another about a person covered in feces causing a shipwreck. And then there's the story of my own wedding, where there's the third and forming the complete trifecta of body fluids, blood. In that story, my wife's grandmother was locked in a bedroom because she was Hindu. This was a Catholic wedding. We were having it in the garden, and a Catholic priest was brought in from far away. And the grandmother was screaming and yelling from the bedroom through the entire service. But then it stopped, and it was quiet for a while. And the priest was able to get through all of the scripture. And that was when I began noticing a rustling in the bushes right next to me. And through a gap in the foliage, I caught sight of an eye. It was the grandmother staring back at me. She had escaped from the bedroom and dragged the most important offering in a Balinese Hindu wedding, the sacrifice of a live hog. And so right as I was supposed to say my one line, I do, the grandmother slit the throat of the hog, causing this awful, hosey squealing to erupt from the bush. And that was when dub dub, my father-in-law was on his feet. He had not underestimated his own mother, and he gave a signal, and two men I'd never seen before descended on the bush. But all they succeeded in doing was release the hog, which came rocketing out of the bush right at the Catholic priest, who struck dramatic poses of terror as the thing shot past him, searching for some portal of escape, and finding none, began to run the perimeter of the garden, bleeding profusely from its throat. My parents were there. They had no idea what was going on. My mother later thought this was all part of the ceremony. I have never seen my father-in-law so angry. He was dark with rage, trembling in every fiber of his body. And when that pig crossed in front of him, was the sound of the swoop of his mighty leg. And then pop, as he connected with his foot just below the animal's sternum. But alas, it didn't go anywhere. It flopped in the ground, lifeless in front of him. All of the force of that kick had been transferred to the animal's open throat, and a spray of blood shot out of the pig all over the Catholic priest, who looked at his white robes, oh, no longer white, and threw open his arms and began to wail. Oh! And everyone rushed to comfort him. Yes, that is a scene from one of my stories. My students, some of whom are here, are subjected constantly to my outrageous, outlandish tales from Indonesia. And of course, so are the next three tellers. They are all from the Do Tell Story Swap. The first, Sharon Elwell, the second, Vicki Ness, the third, Genevieve Navarre Franklin. We'll begin with Sharon. Sharon has taught music, Spanish, ESL, and every grade level in California schools. Like all teachers, she collected a treasury of experiences to surprise and delight her audiences with humor and compassion. She's written several books, including memoirs about her life as a teacher. These are available on Amazon.com. She helps others write their memoirs at historyherstory.com. And she's a regular teller with the Do Tell Story Swap and comes to us from Bremerton, Washington. Please welcome to the Do Tell stage, Sharon Elwell.
No blood, no body fluid. This one is an old story. A long time ago, in a place nowhere near you, there was a community where every single person who lived there was crabby and grumpy. Men complained that their work was too hard. Women complained that their work was unappreciated. Grandmas complained that their bones ached. Grandpas forgot what they were complaining about, and that made them the crabbiest of all. Even the children bought into this terrible habit. They sulked, they pouted, they whined. It's too much homework. I hate broccoli. There's nothing to do here. That last one was true. It was a boring place because nobody wanted to go there. And then one day they heard something nobody had heard in a long time. It sounded cheerful. And so the children followed the sound, trying to figure out where it was coming from. And they found a stranger walking into town. His clothing was covered with patches of all different colors. He had a hat with a big feather, and he was carrying a large sack. "What's in the bag, mister?" "This is a bag of contentment." "What's contentment?" "Oh, this is worse than I thought. We don't have a moment to spare." And so he lengthened his stride and quickened his pace and headed for the town square. He stationed himself in front of the big old community tree and began calling out, "Gather round, everybody, come one, come all. Bring me your troubles, the large and the small. Bring me your troubles, let the magic begin. I have a sack here, just throw them right in. We'll shrink those troubles right down to size, and you will see them disappear right before your eyes." Well, people came running for that. But when they got there, they couldn't figure out what to do. How do you throw your trouble into a bag? And so they just kind of hung back and watched and waited until one little girl seemed to get the idea. She marched boldly up and took out her skate key and threw that into the bag and said, "I lost those skates." And then a little boy took off his baseball hat. He put that in the bag and said, "I didn't make the team." Another girl came by with a little collar and a bell on it and said, "My cat died." Well, by then the adults started to get the idea. A bald man put in his hairbrush. A young widow threw in her dancing shoes. An older man walked up with a book of poetry and said, "I can't see well enough to read these anymore." Well, once that got started, everybody came, each putting in the trouble or problem. And when they were done, the peddler said, "I'm going to hang these troubles up on this tree. We'll put them right up for everyone to see." And he did just that, like they were Christmas ornaments, until that tree was covered. And then he said, "Now's your opportunity to make a change. You've got a chance to rearrange. You'll see that the magic has begun. Look very carefully and pick just one." So everyone went up to the tree like people in an art gallery and looked and watched and thought and chose. And slowly but slowly, each one reached up and took a trouble. And it was always the one that they had come with in the first place, because in comparison to all the others, it looked the easiest to manage, the quickest to sort through. And so they were surprised and went home. But a few of them stayed there. And an older woman went up to the little girl whose cat had died and said, "My cat just had kittens. Would you like to come and choose one?" And a father went up to the boy who had not made the baseball team. And he said, "I used to play some baseball. I'd be glad to give you some pointers if you'd like to improve your game and try again." A teenager went up to the older man with the book of poetry and said, "I could read these for you." And the bald man invited the young widow to a dance. And as all of those conversations were going on, nobody even noticed as the peddler folded up his bag and slipped away down the road. And that's the end of that tale.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Your stories are always so full of compassion, and the characters have such dimension to them. I really appreciate your stories. So many of my stories, my father-in-law is kicking stuff. In one, he's kicking a cat. In another, a pile of offerings someone made. And I was thinking maybe tonight, in honor of the compassion in stories like that one told by Sharon, in honor of Ethnotech being here, who've given me a reason to really rethink my storytelling and even my relationship to Indonesia, my relationship to my own family, and my relationship to my father-in-law, who always appears as this comic, flat, angry, incomprehensible man. I'm not saying he wasn't that, but there was more to him. I was at an event just 2 years ago, and there were 3 men sitting in the back, and they were acquaintances of my father-in-law. And I was sitting near them and I moved over. One of them had a scar on his face. Another had gold teeth, which I didn't often see in Bali. And the third was wearing a knit cap. And they seemed separate from everybody. And I began to talk to them. And I learned something about my father-in-law. He had been a head of school in a pretty tough part of Bali. We think of it as being a paradise, but there was a pretty rough side of town. And there was a high school that had a lot of crime. There was theft. There were attacks, assaults, all kinds of terrible things. And when he got there, he was faced with a very difficult task. And he made the interesting choice to go out and hire basically gang members to come and work in the school. And these 3 men told me about this. The one with the knit cap explained we were preman, which is the word for gangster in Indonesian. Your father was the only one who could see beyond our rough appearances. The one with gold teeth said, your father-in-law was the only one who ever gave me a chance in my life. And the one with the cap continued, he said he turned us around, and in turn, we turned the school around. It went from being a den of iniquity into a nationally recognized high school. The 3 of them stood up and they left. And the one with the scar hadn't said anything, and he stayed behind. And he shook my hand and he said to me, your father-in-law was a very great man. Maybe one of the greatest I've ever known. And when he said that, there were tears in his eyes. It's important to remember that people have so many different sides to them. And I wanted people to know my father-in-law was much more than someone who kicks cats, punts pigs, and shouts all the time. Our next teller is very gifted at creating characters with many, many dimensions. Vicki Ness, a San Francisco storyteller before moving up here with us, the North Bay. She performed throughout the Bay Area, created a story showcase for KPFA, community radio, focusing on subjects such as urban legends, death and afterlife, and visions. Vicki specializes in new folk tales, gentle, slightly magical stories for adults. She also teaches improvisational storytelling in the United States and in India, and she is a regular member of our Story Swap. Please recognize Vicki Ness.
Thank you. In keeping with the long line of grouches we've heard about, I'd like to introduce you to Wilmer. As the days went on in Wilmer's long life, they seemed to grow grayer, grainier, and he grew grumpier as time went on. And when he finally found himself toddling to the very abyss, the cold, dark emptiness of retirement, he looked down and he decided, not going. He went back to work. Wilmer was the manager of a small manufacturing plant, and his job was to walk up and down the aisles, making sure that all the wheels kept turning, all the levers kept moving, all the gizmos kept gizmoing, and nobody was slacking off. And he was good at it. Up and down the line he went before clanking up the metal steps to his office. At the landing, he would stop and look over all the workings running like clockwork, and it made him very happy. Yeah. Up the steps he would go finally to that plywood box of an office that overlooked the floor and slam the door. Well, every week, each of his underlings, his assistant managers, his delivery people, his operations people, his administrative assistants, one by one, would have to clank up those steps into his office and give their numbers and give their due dates and show their pie charts and their graphs. And they would hope and pray that maybe he would smile, but it was never to be. He would peck at his computer, he would scratch on his paper, and he would grumble. And when the final benediction of, well, that's stupid, who did that? That was their cue to leave as quickly as they could. Well, one day, as they came up to his expansive, dusty wood desk, they each of them noticed that there were bricks, glistening, glowing white bricks scattered all over the desk, made of sugar, glistening in the fluorescent light. They were beautiful, but what were they for? And it occurred to them maybe they were supposed to do something about them, and they hadn't. And so they just ignored them. And Wilmer ignored them, and everything went on as normal. Except the bricks kept accumulating, and they formed a wall. And the wall kept growing every week, growing higher, like a fortress, higher, till they could no longer see Wilmer. They could hear the tick, tick, tick on the computer. They could hear the scratch, scratch, scratch of a pen on paper. And they could hear, only an idiot would do that. Then they'd leave. Everything was fine. Well, the wall grew into a castle, a beautiful filigreed castle with icing and all kinds of beautiful decorations. And there were turrets that went straight up into coned caps on the top with spun sugar flying dragon weather vanes that spun in intermittent air. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. And behind all this sat Wilmer. There was one window in the facade, and that was right opposite his work lamp, which emitted a beautiful butter yellow light. But otherwise, they had no idea what was on the other side of the castle wall. And they would give their numbers, and they would hold up their pie charts to nobody. And they'd hear a ticka-ticka and a scritch-scritch. And every so often, over the very top battlement, Wilmer would rise up like an icy cold dawn on an Arctic landscape. Well, that was stupid. And he'd sink back down again But the day came when they didn't hear anything at all, which made them very happy. They gave their numbers, they read their reports, and out the door they went. Ha! Shortly after that, a postcard came addressed to the entire company. On the front, there were 2 lawn chairs facing a beautiful cobalt ocean with a setting sun, and it said, "Wish you were here." And on the back, it said, "Dear everyone, finally, I know how to be the richest man in the world. Love, Wilmer." Everybody looked at each other. Wilmer's not rich. Do you get this? I don't get this. What's this about? This is stupid. And so the postcard wound up tacked to the employee bulletin board in the lunchroom, totally ignored, except by the HR lady who was dripping her coffee one day and decided to take a look at what was on the bulletin board. And she took the postcard down and she read it. "Wilmer's not rich. I know what he makes, and he's not rich. Where's he getting that money from?" So she took her coffee and she ran over to the CFO's office. That's the Chief Financial Officer. And he looked in his computer and he checked all his numbers to see if somebody was skimming off of the top. But everything was fine. But still, something's wrong. Wilmer's not rich. So the 2 of them went over to the COO's office, which is the Chief Operating Officer. And she looked into her computer and she checked all the products coming and going, and nothing was being skimmed off the top, nothing sold on eBay. That's a thing, you know, but everything was fine. But she looked at the postcard and she said, "Something's wrong. He's not rich." So the 3 of them went up to the CEO's office. He didn't even need to look on his computer. "This is wrong. I'm rich. He's not. Something's wrong. This is not good." So the 4 of them stormed the castle. Up the clanking steps they went, into the office, around the glistening, beautiful facade of the castle. And there they saw a dusty desk. They saw a sandwich that was half eaten, and it was so dried out that the edges were curling up like pagoda eaves. And in the corner, there was a little tiny spider weaving a little gray web. And there was a coffee mug, full of, And so they went into his computer. And all his folders were perfectly fine, nothing amiss. So then they went into his personal email, and that's when they found it. Oh yeah, embezzlement, extortion maybe, Ponzi schemes. Oh, I bet. And they found email after email after email from a certain H. Knight to Wilmer and back. And they opened them up. We've got them now. But what they discovered was that it was actually hundreds and hundreds of love letters from a certain Helen Knight to Wilmer and back. And so they looked at the deserted desk, and then they re-looked at the postcard again, and they realized that it didn't ever say, "Dear everyone, finally I know how to be the richest man in the world," with a sarcastic, "Love, Wilmer." That's not what it said at all. What it actually said was, "Dear everyone, finally I know how to be the richest man in the world. Love, Wilmer."
Oh, Vicky, thank you. I think I needed that. For a while, it was like a weird kind of distorted Kafka world, like The Castle by Kafka, you know. That was a beautiful story. I love how you can turn it around on a dime at the end too. So the reason that I met those 3 men was there was a memorial for my father-in-law. He passed away recently. he had just suddenly gone into the hospital, and 7 hours later, he was dead. There was some kind of diagnosis. I didn't understand it. 20 hours later, my wife and I were changing planes in Taiwan. And then 30 hours later, we were getting our luggage in Ngurah Rai Airport in Bali. And we got a FaceTime call. And my wife opened it up to see the cremation fire and her father's body burning, which is what they do in Bali. And she just fell to her knees. This woman, my wife, who never wants to be the center of attention in the slightest way, began to unabashedly wail in grief in the middle of hundreds of people in Ngurah Rai Airport. And I think seeing my wife's grief really affected me. Her grief for her father, whom she loved, the man that I tell stories about kicking pigs and punting cats. And these are kind of the stories that have defined me as a storyteller. But I don't think I'll ever feel the same way about telling them again. I think this is also something that is very positive. It's one of the powerful things about storytelling, because we don't write our stories down, and our stories are fluid, and they can change, and they mold with us as we go through life. And in what was light and humorous, there can be sorrow. In sadness and despair, we can find hope. And then in hope, maybe once again, find humor. Nothing matches the complexity of life in all of its range, quite like an evening of stories told by people who love storytelling. We're going to finish our TELLABRATION with a story by Genevieve Navarre Franklin. She discovered the joy of personal narrative storytelling on her first visit to the Moth in 2017, when she was astounded to hear her name. I don't know if you know what that's like. You get your name pulled out of a hat, and then suddenly you jump up in front of 600 people. And since then, she's told stories in San Francisco, Berkeley, Petaluma, Oakland, and virtual stories, including a Moth in Louisville, Austin, New York, Melbourne, London, and then the National Storytelling Network events, recently placing second in the 2022 Grand Slam. Genevieve draws on her experience as an immigrant, a cancer survivor, an interpreter, a mediator, a trainer, and a chaplain, and especially on the brief but unforgettable years she shared with her beloved partner, Dawn. She is ever gratefully a regular teller with our swap. And Genevieve, I have to say that we are in turn quite grateful that you are counted among us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the virtual stage, Genevieve.
Let's see. Hold on a second. I almost stopped your cloud recording because I was trying to start my own. So I'm just going to cancel that. And we'll forget all about that. Before I start, I'd just like to share something. I don't know if this will show, but this is the subject of my stories tonight. This is Dawn Franklin. And this is a new form. These are actually 3 stories woven together. So if you've been to symphonies, it's like having 3 movements. Just hold the silence between the stories. You'll know because I'm going to say part 1, part 2, and part 3. Today is the full moon night, and it's no coincidence that this happened to be the day to tell these stories. full moon nights. Tonight we are graced by a full beaver moon. The full moon, prized by sailors for raising tides, illuminating danger, lifting the spirits of the darkened soul. The full moon, bringer of completion, abundance, and transformation. Part 1. My husband, Don, lost his vision in his late 20s, and though I met him 10 years later, it was still difficult for him to choose between keeping the memories of what he once could see or letting them go. Although it was painful for him, he chose to treasure every image he could remember. And I became his partner, both in his experiencing the new and re-experiencing the old memories. I would describe scenes to him or gently put objects in his hands so he could feel them. But we were connected by things that were untouchable and far away as well. The moon had always meant a lot to Don, and it grew to represent a bond between us as well. We made it a point to go out under its benevolent light whenever it was full. He would sometimes say, wait, let me see, is it over there? I would say, no, that's a street light, but the moon is so bright tonight, it's even brighter than that light. Then I'd take his hand and say, it's actually over there. When I first met Don, I was cautious about deepening our relationship. He had experienced so much loss that I didn't want to cause him yet another disappointment. One day in his flat, when I was still debating the issue about whether he was the companion that was right for me and I right for him, I stepped into his bathroom. It had a small window kept open 2 inches that led down, a light well to the service entrance 3 stories below. On the window ledge reposed a tiny glazed ceramic pot, the color of caramel, topped by a lid that was the most amazing silvery blue sculptured smiling moon face that I had ever seen. It was smaller than a dime. Looking at it made me realize anybody who has a marvel such as this on his window ledge is really, really, really special. I walked out, took Don's hands in mine and said, it's you and me and Mr. Moon from now until forever, until the end of time. Soon after that, we decided my 2 cats could stay at his apartment. They chased each other constantly, thundering up and down the long hallway. One was a polite, demure little girl, and the other was hell on paws. That boy, Misha, was full of the dickens. One evening, I heard him playing with something in the bathroom. Oh, I rushed in. Too late. He had batted Mr. Moon out that tiny 2-inch opening. Down he went. I was mortified, but confessed Misha's sins to Don, who was very, very, very upset at the disappearance of a memento from days when he could see. Don's blindness proved to be to Misha's advantage. If he had been able to catch him, I'm sure Don would have throttled him. Dashing downstairs, grateful that it was a bright full moon night, I pledged, I won't sleep until I find Mr. Moon. I looked and looked, but to no avail. Just as I started back up, I spied a very small sky blue disc near a garbage bin. It was the underside of the little pot's lid. A peacefully radiant Mr. Moon with his puffy little cheeks and cheery round eyes. He'd fallen down those 3 stories and fortunately landed on the gumpy concrete with nary a scratch on his nose. But Don remained somber. The little pot on which Mr. Moon had rested was still missing. As soon as it was light the following morning, I renewed my search. On a whim, I looked out the living room window and across the separation between the building where we lived on the 3rd floor and the one next to us, a 2-story building with a flat tar and gravel roof, I made out another disc. This one was white and the size of a nickel. Was it a leaf or a torn piece of paper taken there by the wind? Could it possibly be the little pot resting upside down? How? I ran downstairs and zipped through the nail salon next door, calling out, "Excuse me, 谢谢你," to the bewildered Chinese women who were there. And I raced up their fire escape. In the middle of the rooftop, a full 20 feet away from the window from where it had flown out sideways, lay Mr. Moon's little pot, virtually unscathed as well. Breathlessly triumphant back home, I cradled the rescued Voyager into Dawn's hand, exclaiming, "It's you and me and Mr. Moon from now until forever, until the end of time." Thus was Mr. Moon restored to our sailing crew to travel under many more full moons together. But no ship sailed forever. Years later, we lay at final port in hospital comfort care as Dawn's body tugged at its moorings. After 3 sleepless nights drifting in the doldrums, I woke up with a feeling of renewed trust and drew open the curtains covering the picture window to let in some promise. Filling the space in broad daylight, gazing back at me in all tranquility, was the gossamer orb of Mr. Moon. 12 hours later, 8 years ago to this very day, at this very hour, on a full moon night, like this very night, Dawn breathed his last. But before he cast off, I softly kissed his face, his eyes, his chin, his cheeks, his mouth, and said, "It's you and me and Mr. Moon from now until forever, until the end of time." Part 2. A walk together in Golden Gate Park was all it had taken for me to realize that Dawn would be my partner, mentor, and companion for a lifetime. Our courtship was brief, our commitment abiding. Our strengths and weaknesses balanced each other. He was my rudder, I was his sail. Dawn was witty, bright, and sensitive, considerate, and honest. So when on another walk several weeks later, I found him troubled and silent. I could tell he was struggling with something he dreaded to reveal. Finally, he whispered falteringly, "Jan, I'm in end-stage renal failure." It was distressing news, but I'd known before committing to our relationship that such storms were bound to happen. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. Within a few months, unplanned exposure to a visiting toddler replete with pink eye and a dripping nose caused whatever kidney function Dawn had left to fail altogether. We found ourselves in hospital again, dealing with raging fever, spiking blood sugars, and the placement of a shunt so that he'd be able to undergo that life-saving torture known as dialysis. Until with hope, grit, and a miracle, an organ donor might be found. In Dawn's case, the predilection of post-World War II American couples to have large families proved to be a boon. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, all of whom offered to be tested for compatibility. Against the odds and in order of squeamishness, they came in at one 50% match, one 75% match, and a brother and a sister who improbably were each 100% match. Soon his older brother's kidney was tucked in Dawn's pelvis, and as the surgeon quipped, pinked up and peed. Dawn was steadfast in doing everything necessary to protect the unmeasurable gift that his brother had given him. He never had a single rejection episode. Dawn, the kidney, and I journeyed together for over 20 more years. We were grateful beyond words. Part 3. On the night that Dawn died, I remained in the hospital waiting to receive a call from the National Donate Life Registry. After what seemed like an eternity, since his body had been taken to the bowels of the hospital to await approval for organ harvesting, the phone rang and I proceeded to answer endless details questions about his health history. By the time we were done, I had little hope that the vessel that had been his disease ravaged body would fulfill our dreams of leaving a life legacy to someone else. But at least I felt we had tried. With a sigh and a final click of the hospital phone, I silently gathered up the piles of sundry items that one accumulates on such vigils, walked to the empty parking lot, and slowly drove away. From above, the full moon's silvery streams of soft blue light guided me home on the first of so many sailing nights to come without the captain of my ship. Some days later, I received a letter confirming my doubts that his organs would not be viable for transplantation. But the letter had curiously come not from the National Registry, but from an organization known as SightLife. Reading past the words of sympathy and cordial regrets of the writer, I came upon deep felt expressions of gratitude and a final revelatory explanation. For in the end, one of Don's corneas, from my ever constant Don, who had struggled so to bear the loss of his own sight, one delicate transparent lens had weathered the crashing waves of his oh so many trials, restoring vision to another with his priceless and enduring final gift.
Wow. Thank you so much, Genevieve. That was a really powerful note to end on. I'm going to bring out all of our storytellers. I want to thank Ethnotech, Robert and Nancy, Genevieve, of course, Sharon, and Vicky. And my student had to go back to direct her play, so she's not here anymore. But I hope the audience joins me in thanking these fantastic storytellers. We are just beginning the month of November, and there are many, many great events ahead. Please look at the Storytelling Association of California website for all the activities that other SWAPs are doing in the Bay Area as well as in Southern California. And do not forget to check out Ethnotech's website to see all of the fantastic things they have going, some of which we've mentioned. On behalf of the Storytelling Association of California and the Do Tell Story Swap, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and celebrating the gift of story during the month of November, the month of storytelling. Thank you all very much and have a fantastic evening.
Cook safe, safe, safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.